That's the problem. Yep. I figured it out. Hey, how's it going? Happy Saturday. I'll redo the intro. You see, I had like minutes left. Like, I'm like, there's 50 seconds left. I managed to get all the sheets finished. I had all the info right. I remembered the day. Had to be muted. We can't start it off perfect. It's just not the way it works. Something's got to be wrong. It's not a good stream unless something goes wrong. Well, something is going to go wrong regardless, right? Like, it's the curse of the stream. Somewhere throughout the course of the stream, hey, Rift Kick, something's going to go wrong. So if you don't get that out at the beginning, then for the rest of the stream, you're just like, shit, when's it going to blow up? So we got it out of the way. It's done. It's good. How's it going? How's your Saturday? You want to talk about some games?
Of course I do. That's what I always want to
do. Yeah, that's the question you ask yourself. If you could talk about anything you wanted to talk about, what would you want to talk about? If it's games, this is the place to be. Wales is hot for a change. Excellent. Games! Yeah, exactly. That's why we're here. Lakeview Cabin, we're saving the best for last. First, we're going to talk about Twing Twang. Oh, yeah.
I am stoked to eventually talk about Lakeview Cabin, though. I'm looking forward to that for a while.
Twing Twang, let's go. Okay. Does anybody want to say anything about Twing Twang?
I've got things to say.
You've got things to say.
I'm sure if Carter was here, he would also have things to say.
Oh, I'm sure he would. He's playing a game far more worth playing right now. Far more worth playing. Comically, it's 10 out of 10. Oh yeah, it was great to stream it. Just, I don't play it at home by yourself. That's not the way to play that game. World building, though. Let's really dig into the game. Let's not just focus on all the flaws, because it's easy to just say, whoa, that game. But the world building. What do you guys feel on the world building?
I don't know. It was, like I said, similar to the other games we just reviewed earlier. It was kind of from that era of just action combo fighter games where like story wasn't always the focus, but at least like there was something there. The writing to me was kind of didn't help build the world. It was
nothing really helped build. I don't even know if there's a world to build. Like,
yeah, it was.
Is there even a name to that world?
I don't know. You start off just surrounded by people fighting. Next thing you know, you're getting a bunch of words written on you, and it's just what's happening. Now then you start twing twanging for forever.
It feels like I think something was going on, but they never. Like, I watched all the cutscenes at the beginning. I tried. They never really got into anything. The only reason we ended up watching them was because the perfectly camp writing. Oh man!
Like, I just remembered there's a fight. There was the Heavenly Sword, and there was the Raven Lord, and that's what I remember. I don't know if the Raven Lord had an actual name besides just Raven Lord.
I mean, why does he need a name? He doesn't even have any frames.
Yeah.
I'm honestly thinking bad on world building because I don't have a name for the world, or I don't have an idea of where anything is, or it was basically just like, here's a little box, kill things.
Yeah, it was just like an arena. It was definitely not a world.
There is no feel of a world at all in the game. Did not learn its name, a location of anything, and its name or a location of anything, period. That's a complete statement. Each level was essentially a small arena. Characters. Now, this one's an interesting conversation. What do you
There were-
guys in Chatterland think of the characters? I have thoughts, I have things I want to say, but I don't want to influence opinions before I hear what you guys have.
Hi.
Hey, Raven, welcome.
I guess both, Rubido? You
Yeah.
hear both of those opinions?
Just opinion, period. Thoughts. Twing Twang gets your wang. Villains were hilarious. I agree.
Yeah, they were definitely characters. They were very interesting.
And I don't think they were hilarious in a bad way. They were super camp. Now,
Those.
not everybody likes camp, and that's fine. But camp is a thing. Now, the real question on if camp is good or not is, were they going for camp, or were they just really crappy at writing?
It definitely, like, at least from what I saw, it definitely seemed intentional because it was consistent.
Yeah.
With at least the villain characters, that's usually an easy way to tell if it was intentional or not. Is if it's kind of all over the place. If sometimes it's really campy, but then sometimes isn't. But if it's consistently that level of writing, then okay, well, this is intentional. They put actual effort into it. It didn't just kind of happen.
Yeah, you bring up a very, very good point for people to pay attention to, and that's the consistency. Consistency shows intention. Right? If we have consistent camp and a same sort of level, it doesn't have to be exact. Some can be better than others. Not everybody knocks it out of the park on every piece they write. But if it's a consistent style of camp across the characters, it's probably what they were going for. Either that or they're just perfectly consistent shit writers and they're like some camp savant, which I guess is possible, but not likely. Not likely. So we can use that fairly often to judge. Woohoo. Don't shake your hand back and forth. Apparently physics makes liquids splash everywhere.
Gravity, hardest boss. You spill your coffee.
Indeed. All right. However, Serious, I think the game's characters are okay for the game. However, they are not impactful. Yeah, they're not impactful. I agree. They never get a depth of personality. They never get, any personal revelations. They don't change as people ever. It's not great writing, but I think intentional camp is enough to bring it up to okay. Whereas if it was just all over the place and some of it was campy and some of it was just bad and maybe one or two were actually realistic, then it would just be a bad on the characters.
Yeah, Rubido brings up another good point, how they weren't impactful, which kind of goes both ways. Like, they weren't impactful in a good way, but they also weren't impactful in a bad way. Yeah. So it was kind of just right in the middle ground of okay, where, they didn't really detract from the experience. There wasn't characters that were just so jarring, you're just like, oh, what are they doing here? Like, this is terrible. Please just leave. I can't handle this. But exactly. They also weren't, super engaging. So it's really okay. I mean, it did the job. They were there to serve some sort of story they had there, as well as give you something to attack.
Their main purpose was really as a action delivery system. Is what they're there to do, and they provided that. And I actually quite enjoyed the fights with those characters, and I found those thematic to them. I think it's an okay.
Yeah, I'd be happy with an okay.
I'm going to steal your words, because that is so well said, Rubido. That goes in the review. Characters were not impactful. They were campy and consistently written in a humorous, HUMOUROUS way. They are primarily used as an action delivery system. storyline. Can anybody tell me anything about the storyline?
Heavenly sword. There was a sword. I mean, I remember like a bit. Like there was some effort for one, but it didn't really feel like a story. It felt like
well, here's my point to your consistency. They clearly are trying to put a story in.
Yeah.
But I have no idea what any of it was. Like, there's some sort of meaning to her, like, standing there at the level select and talking to these swords coming out of the ground, but what?
And, like, the whole game, like, the story that was in there kind of just felt... Like, there was, of course, the beginning, the flashback, and then, the resolution back and finishing it, without spoiling too much for anyone who actually wants to finish this game for some reason.
Yeah, you're not spoiling anything, don't worry.
Yeah, but it's just like it felt like a smaller section of what would have been like an actual storyline. It's felt like basically it was like the side quest. There was like a fight, and then you fought a dude and you beat him. And why do we care about this? And why is this happening? Why is this like we won and yeah, it was just like it felt like we just jumped right in the middle of something, and then it just kind of happened, and it was like, okay, well, I guess there was something there for us to they gave us some reason to attack things, but didn't really give us an actual reason of what's the hell's going on.
Even the linking between events was so haphazard. Like, the Raven Lord gets the Heavenly Sword because after we killed the Snake Woman with it, we left it in her, and he walked up and took it out of her corpse. That's how he got it. What? I didn't leave my sword there. Give me my sword back. And then, after he gets this all-powerful heirloom masterpiece that he's been looking for, he leaves it in the armory with the rest of the weapons. Wing Twang just breaks in and steals it. That's it?
It was definitely just like and then kind of writing, where there's not really like intersecting points or like an actual reasoning to a lot of stuff. It's just like, well, we need to do this and then this and then this to get to the end. It's like they had the beginning sorted out and the end sorted out, and they just kind of just jumbled in between to get to the end, and it just didn't. There's a lot of better ways that could have been. And
then can still get an okay. It can still be passable as like an action delivery system and an enjoyable, but the links between the and thens, at least try to make them make sense. Okay, come on, I just left my sword behind in the boss when I beat her. That's how I lose my sword. That bugged me the whole time. Does anybody disagree with the bad storyline? Anybody at all? Speak now, or it goes down forever. Okay.
Like, they could have explained it in some way, like, oh, you needed to leave it in there, or something like that, which maybe they did, and it just didn't get caught. But, like, it's still just a really weird explanation for that to happen, right? There's, like, a whole... There could have been so much... If they wanted him to be able to get that sword, there's so much that could have been done to have that happen, right? Actual conflict, maybe have a fight that you can't really win too much of, or maybe it's like it's very quick time heavy, so they could have thrown something in there, but it seems like a bit of a cop out just to be like, oh, he'll just get it because he walked up and just took it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
you just walk up and take it back.
They could have just thrown in an enemy that he comes down after I beat her and like one-shots me. Whatever. Then they'd have to explain me getting stronger, but they did. The Heavenly Sword like imbues you with power before you fight him, right? So that actually works in the writing, and it links to future events. It's not that hard to add. Okay, performance. Bad.
Yeah,
what
this
are
is
frames.
This is turning into a slaughter. Before, like, I always try to keep the time in mind when these games are made, because there's always limitations at the time. But God of War 2 came out like 6 months before.
If the hardware
God of War
can't
2
do
came
it,
out.
don't do it.
But yeah, like
You're releasing. Hey, Snow, nice to see ya.
it was a launch title for the system, so they were really trying to push it to be like, look what it can do. And I guess like back then we just weren't spoiled by the high frame rates and consistent stuff we have now. But I feel like that still would have been pretty jarring.
Oh yeah, no,
Back then,
it was
and,
when it came out.
A lot of other launch titles didn't have that jarring of effect, and like even from like God of War 2 compared to this game, even though this game has a lot more technical aspects to it, like the completely useless physics hair for some reason that's there. Like I can't really tell that much difference from God of War 2 in it. Like maybe they had more enemies, but like for actual performance, God of War 2 plays so much better.
It's the enemy count. Like when you're fighting a boss and there's a whole stand full of people, they're rendering models for all the people in the stands.
Yeah, there were full renders too. Like they weren't just like not typical, like because they're in the background, so you don't have to render a full model. You'll have a very low res model because you're not going to be looking at them anyways. It's just typical of what a lot of sports games do with the fans. But they decided just to throw as many people in the background as they could, and you could just that poor system. You just put it through torture. Just chug out these frames.
Yeah, and then the last boss's frames go because there's a crowd all around you and they start really close to you. And you can attack them, which means they are full rendered models with collision and hitboxes. There's full physics going on for them. They've got ragdoll on the bodies. Why? Why all this when I'm trying to fight a boss? Why? Why would you do this? If you want to make it, like later on, the insides are dead. There's people lining the outside, and they're more non-interactable. And the frames recover a little bit after that thing, but you're still rendering models for them all. I mean, there's no more collision. There's no more hitbox. There's no more physics calculation going on for them, at least. But you're still rendering the model. Yeah, there was 0 frames on that last boss. It was bad. It was so bad. So many negative things. Like you're saying that they're trying to show what the hardware can do, and really all they've done is showing us what the hardware can't do. It can't do this good.
Yeah, like can you imagine having the PS2 and playing God of War 2, and then you grab your PS3 and play Heavenly Sword, and you're like, what is happening? Cool, my hair flings around everywhere when I look around, and it's completely jarring, but the whole experience is cutting around everywhere, and you feel like you're lagging. It's just
you are lagging. That's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, and you played it on actual PS3 hardware as well, right? Like you had, you can't blame emulation or anything. That was original. That is just how it ran. It is brutal.
I've on the animation, I feel like I'm pushed towards okay. But I think it might partly just be because I feel like I'm pooing all over this game.
Yeah, it's a bit of a slaughter. Kind of just I mean, I
liked the attack animations.
When you would do your parry and stuff, that shit was actually pretty cool. When you would like do the there's like kill animations and stuff like that. Like they were actually pretty good animations. Like
that's true. That's true.
The combo stuff was good.
I really hated the walk and the run animation. The ladder climbing was really good.
Yeah, it's definitely not good, but I wouldn't say that it's bad. I mean, there was actually a lot of pretty good animation in it. I think it balances out to an okay. Some of it is definitely very jarring and it pulls you out, but a bunch of it still kind of immerses you in it. Like those kill animations as well as even the cutscene ones, because I think they might have done motion capture for that.
They probably did, knowing them. That's the most expensive way to do it. So.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure from like watching the cutscenes, they look motion captured. Otherwise, they did a fantastic job like actually animating it. So I'd say okay.
Anybody disagree? Is there anybody that doesn't want us to give an okay to the animations? It was okay. Okay. There were good parts to the animations. Ladders. combat and glory kills, we're just going to call them.
Sure.
We're good. Running was off-putting. Combat was the focus of the game. And the combat part felt good. It was like when I'm running from part to part is when I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. But when I was in combat, I didn't notice so much. I just had fun with it. And it was good combat. I'll give it that. Style, you're fine with it too. Okay. I need water. I want to hear from at least 2 or 3 people what you guys think style should be. I'll be right back. 2 seconds.
Sounds good. I'll just ramble a bit with my opinion on it. It's hard for me because like I found that it's not bad style, but it's just part of that issue when you do like desert setting is that everything can just kind of be so a bit bland and washed out because it's kind of the intention it's supposed to be, but I don't know. It still can be done so well. You can still do like games like Kenshi or like Mad Max and stuff like that. You can still do those like desert-scape war torn areas. They still have a lot of character to them, a lot more aesthetic. This was just kind of felt like, yeah, we've got a bunch of enemies that like their style okay, but they still felt kind of just generic as like, yeah, we're just fighters with swords. The actual main character was pretty good, and I don't know how it felt the Ravenlord style. That felt a bit cliche to me.
Cliche is fine in a camp story.
Yeah, but it felt like it wasn't like intentionally cliche. It was just like, oh, we need an evil, slightly edgy person. We'll do Ravenlord. And
sorry, to note on Raven's point on style is quite complex because it relies on personal taste. We try to remove the personal taste side of it and look at consistency of style, relevance of style, though even that could be personal, but mainly consistency. It doesn't keep a consistent look and feel through the entire thing. If it changes, are the changes relevant? Are the changes reasonable? Are they explained?
And back to intention as well. Like you can try to figure out what their intended style was and if they hit it or not. Which I'd say, yeah, it was like desert arena combat. The setting, everything like historic wise seemed in place. Nothing really stood out too much. Like a lot of the bosses or enemies were different, but they were all still kind of relatively in that same palette. Yep. So I think style-wise, I think they did a fine job. They knew what they wanted to go for, and I think they did it. It's just, yeah, it's a bit hard to. It also felt a lot just kind of rehashed and reused through it, like the same kind of thing for like the whole game, which isn't always a bad thing.
I'd still like to see a
different palette
every once in a while.
Yeah, there could have been at least some change, something in the style that would complement the game in some way, or the style that would complement kind of what's going on. But from beginning to end was just kind of the same thing happening, the same thing over and over again. Wasn't something super special in the style, wasn't something like super unique. It's definitely kind of just pulled inspiration from a few places and kind of ran with it. Yeah. I don't know if it can stand on its own. Usually when I can give a game a good for style, even if I don't like it, it usually means that like you can describe the style by referring to the game, which you can kind of do, but not good enough with Heavenly Sword. You can't be like, oh, this game. If you're looking at something else, it's a kind of desert themed combat. You can't really be like, oh, it's got a Heavenly Sword style.
Yeah, no.
You would kind of get a gist of it, but it wouldn't be enough to fully flesh out like what they were trying to do. So, but it wasn't terrible. So I kind of lean more back to okay.
I'm with you on the okay. There's never a point where it's like it doesn't have its own style. There's nothing pronounced about it. It's just kind of bland. But it's not offensive. It's not like, all over the place or just, looking at it going, what are you guys thinking? An example of one that people can give a good to its style where a lot of people still didn't like it, I would say is like WildStar. You know, a lot of people looked at it like, that's not really a style for me, especially because they were going for a more hardcore market with the kiddie feel. But everything was on point. Everything looked like it fit in. Everything was very smooth. Actually, I didn't like the style of the game at first, but once I started playing it for a bit, the mechanics were so good, and the style was so consistent, and everything felt so well put together that it just grew on me. I actually really liked it by the end.
I like the style right out of the gate, but I kind of grew up playing a lot of those like Ratchet and Clank games, so I was kind of just gave me nostalgia for that.
Style is okay. Does not stand out in any positive way. It does not stand out in any negative way. You didn't screw it up, but you didn't really do an amazing job either. Musical score. Think it gets okay based on my.
It's. They actually had a decent score for it. They put a decent amount of effort to it. They had an orchestral score. I noticed during like the ending fight, and the boss fights, it was actually it fit it pretty well. It actually was pretty good, but it wasn't that step above where you become super memorable and you kind of get goosebumps when you're sitting there being like, oh my god, this is just insanely epic. Or you get that emotional feel when there's something sad going on and there's the score to complement it. But I think they did a good job. But overall, for the whole game, I think it still lands until okay.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's on our typical benchmark of do we remember it or not. It's in the I don't remember it category, really. And I don't remember it usually gets an okay. If anybody's not familiar with our scale, if we remember it negatively, it's a bad. If we remember it positively, it's a good. If we don't really remember the musical score, then we just figure it probably just fit in okay. So it never took us out of the game, but it never helped us get into it. The music fit the moment, but never really stood out. I'd agree with okay for music, yeah. Voice acting?
I'm on the fence with this because it was like, I mean, unfortunately, like writing can kind of hinder.
The writing was camp, but it was delivered perfectly camp.
Yeah,
actually, now that I think about it more, all of the villains, and even the little girl with Twing Twang, she did a good job.
Yeah,
10 out of 10 for the Twing Twang alone. Time for Twing Twang? Like, yeah, I think the voice acting was good. I really do. I think that was my favorite part of it.
Yeah, I'd agree with it. Good. They even near the end in some of the cutscenes, like I said, it's camp writing, but I mean, camp writing is actually really hard to voice act, and they did a really good job of it. Without it, if you don't hit those, that kind of emotion and that kind of slight silliness you need with the slight seriousness, it just comes off kind of weird. But they deliver it perfectly, especially with those villains. Those villains were hilarious, but you still took them seriously.
Yes, they did. In all the right ways. Sound effects?
I'd lean towards good. I mean, the twink twang was, a staple of it. There was some things that were just kind of like, okay, these are just sound effects that we can just grab and throw them in there. But I mean, that's what happens with a lot of games. Not every single sound effect needs to be, custom made, perfect every single time with some sort of variance. But I mean, the stuff that needed to be there, like the actual fighting and the blocking and the twing twang of the heavenly sword, it was good. I'd say it was good.
Well, the twing twang was the bow.
Yeah. Sorry.
But yeah, the cling clang was good too.
Yeah, I meant to say cling clang, cling clang, and then twing twang. Yeah. Twing twang is just so much fun to say.
It is fun to say. And like we always talk about, there was this individual sound for the parry. So you got an audio cue. There's an individual sound for the block and the hit. So just by attacking, based on the sound I'm hearing, I can tell what's going on. That's really, really important in the sound effect world. Sound effects are supposed to relay, it doesn't just help the player feel like he's in the right place. It's supposed to relay information to the player. Sound is something that is used very effectively for that. We see it a lot in first-person shooters with the sound of footsteps and stuff like that. That would be all sound effects. That's very, very important. They have to be coming from the right place at the right time, the right volume, stuff like that. When you're in a fighting game like, say, Sekiro, the difference of the hit to the block to the parry in a very, very fast, interactive game allows you to respond properly to the events happening around you. It reduces UI clutter, and the sound is so good for it. Yes, exactly. It helps you feel like you're in there. It uses extra senses. It really is a more complete feel of it. Yeah, I'm actually of the good, which is interesting. I actually didn't expect this game to get a good in an entire category, but the sound was actually pretty well done. Yeah.
Just because, overall it's not going to be great doesn't mean there weren't good parts of it. They definitely got some stuff right.
Yep. Sound effects are used while combat. Sounds good. Sounds are used effectively to relay information to the player. Okay. Get your poo-poo shoes back on. Gameplay. Accessibility, just due to the era period, it's an automatic bad.
It didn't have to be. There were some games that still did that in that era, but it's more common for them to be like this. Remember, when you first started to give you options, and there was one option in there before the game started?
Sliders. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was it.
Yep. Once you actually get into the game, you can get into more options, but it was still pretty limited. Very limited control, rebinding, no... Was there CC? I don't even remember if there was... I think there was subtitle, but no CC. Subtitle is the one option it gives you at the beginning, on or off, and that was it.
Yeah. But it's also lame that the first option menu you have doesn't really have any options.
Yeah, that sucks.
If you need those options to actually understand what's going on in the game, you're kind of just screwed right out the gate.
So mechanics. This is going to take a little bit, and I'm torn on this one. I am.
It's one of those games that's just all over the place with its mechanics. There were a lot. It was like half fighting game, half mini games.
Yeah.
They weren't necessarily bad mini games, but
so let's start. Let's start at the beginning and talk about one and look at it. Let's just start with the main focus of the game, which is the sword combat. I feel like the combos were never explained, other than here's some different button combinations you can use. They never gave me a reason to use any of them, ever, other than spam some buttons and stuff will happen and enemies will die. And that was really my experience of the game. I liked the parry system, though. The parry system felt good. The parry system felt really good.
Not the one where you just stand still and auto block. No, it's the one where you kill the thing if you parry it, right? Get the glory kill or whatever.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm actually okay with the stand still to auto block blue attacks. Because they started throwing in orange and red. And orange, I had to be holding a button. And if I was holding that button, I wouldn't auto-block the blue.
Right.
Right, so all of a sudden it created... Yeah, it was just at the beginning, it was like, oh, you're starting... Okay, little boy, give me your hand. Now, come on. Let's go. Yeah, I didn't need that hand-holdy intro game. Thanks, but, it's cool. It ended quickly. It got right into the game. It started actually doing its thing, a couple combats in. I never really got bored. It was fine. I liked the parry system, like I said, a lot. And I think they used it well, other than on bosses. It drove me mental. Okay, there's my bitch about the parry system. I found one. I hated that I couldn't parry bosses. The best mechanic in your whole game, this beautiful risk-reward timed combat system, and then you're like, oh, okay, here's a boss. You're not allowed to do the best part of combat anymore. Have fun.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. But as with the combat and the rest of the stuff, I found the pacing of it was good.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of games will just kind of throw everything at you at once, and it can be, overwhelming, and they're like, oh, we'll just kind of learn it as you go. And I found that they did a good job of introducing the new mechanics, and a good part of that, too, is it keeps you engaged. You're still learning new things. It keeps the game fresh and, a bit unfamiliar, but you're still learning. You're still familiar with the stuff you've learned, but you're still new stuff you got to still master, so it kind of keeps you on your toes a little bit, and I found that the way they kind of spread that out, it was done decently. It wasn't too early, and it wasn't too late, where you go most of the game just, with basic stuff, and then right before the end, they're like, oh yeah, now you can do all this OP stuff that you don't wish that you had the whole time. So I think that it was decently done on that front, at least.
I agree, but like I said, there's still actually a complaint about at least every mechanic, and the fact that they take my favorite part of combat away from me on the bosses, like. You don't have to make it instant kill the bosses or anything like that. Just make it do like a, if I don't dodge the boss and I get in there and I perfect time my parry so I'm not getting hit, I'm not taking damage, give me an opening. Let me get like 1-2 swings off on the boss. That's it. 1, 2, 3 swings. Done. Back into the combat. All of a sudden, I don't have to stand away from the boss and roll around and feel like it's a totally different form of combat than all the rest of the game. I can get in there, I can fight, I can have fun with the boss. I can still do it that way if that's the way I want to do it. Hey, Val, how's it going? Honestly,
yeah,
I think the mechanics have promised they're almost okay, but I'm leaning bad.
I lean more towards okay, but there was just so many of them, and they were kind of all over the place, and they were inconsistent with their quality, and it would have been better if they just, cut the ones that were the least polished, and then spent that time polishing the ones that, were core to the game.
I'd like to also point out that I got through 2 cannon segments before I learned that I could guide the cannonballs.
Yeah, especially those things, like, they just became tedious, too. It was just kill 400 enemies, and it wasn't really that, turret simulator wasn't really that engaging, and there wasn't, I don't know,
throwing really needed having to 6-axis through little holes and stuff just to open paths. The focus of the game is the combat. It's fast, frenetic, interactive combat, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, sit here and master a hat throw. The
arrow shooting seemed okay, because that, it's okay to slow down sometimes. That seemed like it's kind of a fun mechanic to, guide an arrow around and hit your targets and stuff like that, but it still felt like there was a lot missing to it. There could have been a lot more added to it if they wanted to, add puzzles or something, or just do something more than...
Give that ability to the little girl. Her bow was her thing.
Yeah.
Let her be the slow down puzzle section, and let the heavenly sword be the heavenly sword. Like, it's called Heavenly Sword. I want to fight with my sword. You got me shooting things and throwing hats half the time.
Yeah, it definitely felt kind of tech demo-ish at that point, which, I guess they were kind of going for, but it's not really an excuse to put it in a game to be like, hey, look, we have a lot of enemies that screen at once that you can attack at the expense of your frame rate. But for overall, it takes away from the action, because now you're just sitting there, I think at one point you were just holding up, you hold the controller, you're pressing one button. You're like, this is...
Oh yeah, I remember that. I just held the controller up here and pressed a button and talked to you guys until I won. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just like, oh wow, look at this. So yeah, because the combat was okay, and like I said, the combos were kind of cool.
That's what makes me lean almost okay, because when I got to use the sword, I really, really liked it, until they made me fight a boss or do something other than use the sword, like ranged garbage and throwing hat puzzles, which really accounted for probably about 60-70% of the game. Bosses and hat puzzles.
Yeah, if they just kept with the fighting, it would have been good. Because to compare it again, people probably hate this comparison I'm doing, but the game, the predecessor, in the same genre, God of War 2, it had other mechanics with it, but its main focus was the sword fight and the comboing and the fighting. And that's still what you do most of the time. Sure, there's some puzzles here and there that are kind of annoying. You can definitely cut some of those mechanics, but the core of the game is still, I want to fight things and I'm going to fight things. This game just kind of felt all over the place, which is probably due to them trying to shove in a bunch of tech demos.
Yeah, if it had been more Heavenly Swordplay, it definitely would have been better. I rate this game a 6-axis out of 10. I think that's probably higher than we're going to rate it.
6-axis out of 100?
That's closer. No, the audio was good.
So how was the game? I heard things good. It sounded great.
Sound effects and voice acting on point.
Good.
On point.
Would have been a better movie.
Bugs? I don't remember any bugs, at least.
No. I think it's fine. Depending on if we call frame rate drops a bug, which not really.
That wasn't a bug. That was just poor software design.
Yeah.
The advantage of being a console game is
It's not always console. Like, console games still can be completely filled with bugs. I think they just did a decent job polishing on it.
It's more common for a console game to have less bugs because they're running on a consistent piece of hardware.
Yeah, well, it's more common for them not to have crashes, but
yeah,
I mean, there's still I still find. So like, even on like when my first playthrough of Last of Us, I got majority of the models in the intro to T-pose. I found out that if you just hung out for a little bit after they do the little animations, they would just go back to T-posing, and it was just it's a bug in a AAA game, and I'm like, what? This is just kind of hilarious. At least it wasn't great making, and it didn't crash or anything. There's still a lot of stuff that can go wrong.
And we all know that if there is bugs, I will find them often.
Yeah, but yeah, I think it was fun.
There was that one feature where the game would slow down to let you react faster during boss fights. It was only a couple boss fights. Were you here when we talked about that, GlenCon? We went in depth during the performance section as to why it would slow down so much during those sections and all the sins they were committing.
Or maybe it was just intentional slow motion effect.
Feature, not a bug.
But not smooth. Yeah, it's a feature. You get to get slow-mo. You're just... God, it's just so jarring.
RNG. I don't think there is any RNG in the game.
Which is good.
Yeah, I agree.
Fighting games do not need it. There's very small parts that it could use it, but not big enough that like it should fully impact the game. Things like, maybe spawns of certain enemies could have been random, but even then, most of this should all be scripted if it's a linear narrative anyway. So
yeah,
these games definitely don't really need RNG.
No, yeah, all you're introducing by adding RNG to those types of sections is a chance for bugs to happen. Really.
Or just inconsistent gameplay between people's experiences, which is the main issue with RNG what people have. Because there could be an RNG in a game, and someone could have a fantastic experience because they just got lucky. Part of the game. Someone had the same experience and completely unluckily and have a terrible experience, and to them it's a horrible game. But if you're going to introduce some sort of dynamic element to some randoms to it, you got to make sure that it's balanced so that it's not too much of one or the other. It needs to be you find what you want to happen and still have a slight range of scenarios that is going to be similar to the experience you need. But it's random, but it doesn't feel like it's random. If they can tell that if they're just getting unlucky, then it really kind of pulls you out of the game.
Yep, I'm with you. And Control. Did anybody else actually play this game? Rubido did.
I have not, so this is for you.
I'm interested to hear what he says. I don't want to influence people before they get to say their piece. But I don't want to leave the dead air hanging while people type either. So I'm just going to get started on it. I actually quite liked it. I think it would have been smoother if the performance didn't suck so much at certain points. But when it wasn't crappy, and I was allowed to use all my controls, parry felt great, timing was good on it, block worked well. I would have liked a little faster transition between the blue and the orange to deal with so many enemies coming at me. But I don't think that's a control thing as much as a mechanic thing. As I pushed the button, it would start doing the animation. It just took a time to recognize the change from blue to orange attack. The control, from what I remember, was good. Once you play around with it, you understand it quickly. Yep, I'm with you. You know, it was responsive. When I wanted to dodge, it would dodge. I'm not a huge fan of the D-pad or analog stick dodge, but that's just the standard for that game style, and it's fine. That's just an opinion. I think the control was actually quite good. If you remember, there was never a time where I'm like, do this! Actually, you know what? The 6-axis aiming kind of sucks.
Yeah. It's one of those things where, like, it's part of that whole tech demo thing, right? Which really detracts from this as a game overall. Like, if you take out all the things that they were trying to show off in tech demo, then it could have been a solid title.
Oh yeah.
But as it is right now, it is an outdated tech demo, and that doesn't really translate into a great game. It can still be fun, but on the game wise, like, if you want to design a game, you want to make a good game. You don't make a tech demo for it. And tech demos have their place. There's a lot of games that are still, tech demo games that are fun. Gorn's more game now too. They transition to a more of a full game.
Yeah, I know they
nice.
built it.
Started off as a
Crisis.
Yeah,
Crisis is a great example.
They start off as just tech demos, and like they have a feature being like, look what we've accomplished, and then they put a game around it using what they've built, and it can turn out really well. Where this one, they kind of just were shoehorning in different elements of like, look what we can do. We have hair physics. We've got motion controls. We've got way too many people on the screen that you actually ever really need, and it's just none of it was really that great. It all kind of just subtracted more from the experience than it would have added to. Like if the hair physics wasn't there, I don't think anyone would have been like, man, this game. If the hair was moving, whoo-wee, this would have been top notch. But I understand why it's there. It's just an actual analysis of the game at its core. It's just really subtracted from its experience.
Yeah, to analogy it, this game is basically that guy at the skate park that goes, watch what I can do, and then takes off down and tries to do some amazing stunt and like looks cool doing it and then just lands on his face. That's about
okay. Didn't need to do that. Especially not yet. Could have waited until you could actually do it, do it properly.
You were so busy with whether or not you could that you never stopped to think whether you should. Yes, they should have watched Jurassic Park more closely. You're absolutely right. One of my favorite quotes from that movie. I think it is my favorite quote from that movie. So I'm going to give it an okay. Because control was good in the sword combat. And the ladders were good. Then it goes downhill, and it kind of falls off.
I just love how a distinction is that ladders are good.
Well,
which is fair, because ladders are actually really hard, as we talked about in the previous week.
Yeah,
ladders
exactly.
was one of my first things I tried doing when I started learning how to make games. Was I tried to make a ladder, and it kicked my ass, beat me up, and made me realize how hard game dev actually is. So at least they did it well. It's just on its own, without context, it's just kind of funny. Like, oh yeah, how's the game you're playing? Oh yeah, ladders are good. I can go up and down the ladders. Feels okay. It's like, isn't it a fighting game? It's like, yeah, but them ladders.
They stood out a lot to me, and I really liked it because they're fast, they're fluid, and I mentioned it before, but do you remember how I said they did it? They pulled off the ladders?
It's a animation, right? You start it and it just pulls you right through to the top and then ends at the top, right?
Exactly. You walk up and you hit X at the bottom, and the animation is you jumping on the ladder and going up and jumping off, and you have no control through that point. You just hit X once, you're on the top, and you carry along. Nice and fast and fluid. It's exactly the way ladders should be in that kind of game.
And that can still be done wrong too. If like the ladders are too long, it can be if you're not fast enough, you can definitely be very frustrating, which some games have happened. You probably played a game where you accidentally jump on a ladder, you're like, no, stop. And you just watch this guy just slowly kind of slunker down this ladder to get to the bottom. You're like, oh my God, I got to go back up now. And you slowly start going up, and it's kind of a chore. At least this one, they were all short. You just zipped right up them. It was more of if it was more as if you kind of jumped up there, but of course that wouldn't really make sense mechanically for the game, so it's easier to put the ladder. But it's more of that, transition of come here to transition to the next area.
Yes.
And at least they did that well.
She was a small, fast character as well, so it was easy for them to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a really important note. If you're going to take control away from the player at some point in your game in order to animate sections smoothly, make them fast. Don't make them slow and long. Unless it's an obfuscated cutscene and you need to draw that time out for some reason, at which point make it clear. Like coming up to a section, it's the only way to go for the player, not like a little side path where the player can accidentally grab the ladder, like Sudo was saying, and have this, now I've got to sit here and watch, because that's just frustrating. And it's I know when I get to the bottom, I get to do it again as soon as I get down there. Yay.
Especially with like
sword,
fast-paced action games, it should be fast.
That seems to summarize it. I think I'm happy with that. So it amounts to some okay gameplay, some okay video with good audio, and some really bad writing.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I thought it was going to be a bit more, when it started off, I thought it was going to be a bit more of a slaughter. I thought we were just going to completely dump this game in the gutter and just forget about it, but it had some redeeming qualities.
It did, like we said, it could have actually been a good game if they just cut the fat. Well, you see, it's hard to give a number to, right? This is why we do this. Depends. If you're really looking for a game that has good writing, it's a 1 out of 10. At first, I thought it was going to be a sea of red. Yeah, so did we. Legitimately thought this was just going to be a let's shit on Heavenly Sword. But you can't really rate it as a whole, right? Because everybody wants something different out of their game.
Yeah, the number scales get kind of hard. It's more like a generalization, but we found over the years that generalization doesn't really mean too much. It's easy to categorize it and sort it, but at its core, it's like you see that 9 out of 10, and depending on what you're looking for, like you said, if you just can't stand games that have terrible writing, that game's not going to be a 9 out of 10 for you. But someone who's more focused on just action and combat, sure, a game can be a 9 out of 10 and have terrible writing, and they don't care.
Yeah, it's just too arbitrary. There's too much personal opinion involved to wrap up a game as a whole and slap a number on it. And that's why we're like, we've got to stop this review system in the world of games. Let's do it right. Let's analyze it from an individual piece where we can ignore our opinion of it and say, was it consistent? Was it proper? Does it make sense? Then we actually get an idea of what the game is. And I'm pretty happy with it so far. In all the reviews that we've done of games, no one has ever really outright argued with our opinion on a piece yet. I look forward to that day, though. I look forward to it. Where someone's like, no, you're wrong. Bring it on. Bring it on. That's why I live for those arguments. That was my pastime in high school, me and my buddies. We would just choose a topic, choose a side, and just start arguing. Like there's no heart in it other than I want to beat him in the argument. But we still have to come up with logical points for it. It was a great exercise. Okay.
Oh boy. Lakeview Cabin.
I'm interested to see how this one goes.
Yeah. It's definitely know we're in disagreement in some points here, but it'll lead to some good discussion.
Oh, you're wrong. Opinions are just facts that haven't been proven yet. YouTube told me so. Good everywhere!
Maybe. No, it does have its issues, and there's definitely things it could have done a lot better. Just because it was an enjoyable experience doesn't always mean it's a fantastic game. It definitely has a lot of pitfalls.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. 100%. I mean, we can say bad things about Bloodborne, and that's my all-time favorite game period ever. So there's always an area for improvement. To say that there's nothing wrong with Bloodborne and that it's perfect would mean that no game could ever be better. And I can't believe that, because if no game can ever be better than that game, and I've already played through that entire game and explored everywhere, then my life has no more meaning.
You have won video gaming. Everyone pack it up and go home. It's been done. Video game has been won.
Yeah.
They did it.
There's no more need to make video games. Somebody has mastered it already. Next art, please. Yeah, and that's not the way it is. There's room for improvement always. But the world building.
All right, this is going to be a bit of a discussion because it's definitely done intentionally the way it's there, and there is a whole lot of world building in this, but it's hidden. It is not very obvious, and you can go through the entire game without noticing what's actually happening in the background and how every single level intertwines with every other level. So for the actual world that's the game takes place in, just for the fact of, it's actually pretty complicated and intertwined, makes me want to say good. But, just how hard it is to actually find it and figure it out, which for the most part, you're going to have to look up guides and look up, where certain information is. Otherwise, you're just going to have to explore it. And then some of those levels you just can't really explore because you'll just lose and die. And it's not really part of the game. So it's hard for me to say good. But I lean more towards okay because there is a lot of cool stuff in it. If people have questions about it, I actually know a decent amount about what's going on in the background of the game, and it's pretty cool. I love how they kind of everything kind of mattered that was in there. Everything had a purpose.
Yep. For
the most part.
Yep. I realized that all the pieces were purposeful. Everything was. I kind of understood where everything was coming from. Like, I found the bong in the backpack of the teenagers and little things like that.
It's also like the bigger stuff between all the references to the cabin at the start, and every single level takes place around that lake and near the cabin, except for the last level, which takes place in space. But there is the shattered Earth or the shattered planet in the background.
Yep. And
the recreation of the cabin is on the ship itself. So they all take place around. It's still relevant to the name Lakeview Cabin, which isn't always easily distinguishable. But even the big bads in most of the levels are all kind of intertwined. It all has the same kind of all originates from the same kind of incident.
I know that.
It's all kind of relevant, and even like. There's a special ending in 4 or 5, the Halloween one. There's a special ending in that one, which requires you to go back to the 3rd level and basically get an item that allows you to unlock the box and use that to kind of trap one of the monsters, because those are intertwined. The people in the 1st level are related to the monster that's in the 5th level. And I found that was cool, but once again, it's not really explained, and it would take you a long time to figure that out. And you're not really going to do it unless, of course, like I said, you read a guide or you just really
because it's not shoved in your face doesn't mean it's not good.
Yeah,
I mean, Dark Souls is good on the world,
but you can find that a lot easier, and it's a lot kind of laid out for the purpose. It's not so obvious in this game that you should just be poking around random areas and looking in the background here and there, and because you'll die. Like there's not too many areas in those other games where you're just gonna get killed 10 times because you wanted to figure out a little bit of the lore and then not get any sort of benefit from it, rather than just.
There are definitely places like that in Dark Souls.
Just like actual death pits.
Not an actual death pit, just like a crazy hard encounter that is most likely going to kill you over and over and over again, and the reward is an item with some lore on it.
Yeah, well, you still get an item. That's what I'm saying. This game, you don't get anything for it. You
Well,
just get
the item is literally
a little bit of knowledge, and you have to die to do it. You have to give up your runs to be able to do it.
the item is basically a lore delivery tool more than anything. That's what they're used as in that game.
Yeah. I said like it could have been in this too, right? You could have actually picked up something to read or unlock something rather than you have to connect a lot of puzzles together. And I said without a guide, it could have been done a lot better. Like I said, it could have been done, like I said, closer to Bloodborne, where there's items. There's at one part with you go back to 3 and get some items, but how long it would take you to figure that out, and there's not much of the replayability to the levels to figure that stuff out. It's not always inherent that there's multiple endings, because a lot of them. The multiple endings are kind of just, how well can you succeed? How the multiple endings are, well, how am I going to kill the big bad? And how am I going to save everybody? Well, some of them actually have like completely different ways or different paths to go to achieve the end goal. It's not really super clear where, it could have been specified and, maybe a little bit more clear.
That's fair.
But like, I still loved it. I still love what's going on in this world. I thought it was a really cool.
Yeah, I
really
do
cool
love
stuff.
the depth. You bring up some good points. Like, you're telling me stuff I already didn't know. I didn't, based on my playthrough. The only reason I know that there's multiple endings is because of the achievements.
Yeah, that's how I found it at first too, and then I had to look into it. Because like otherwise, why would there's a different order? There's 3 different endings for 5, and like I said, one of them is you have to go into the other level, and it's such a far stretch. If you read the whole the walkthrough for it, it's a pretty far stretch to because every level is unique, which is nice, but that one is unique to the point where it's also kind of a drawback that you would never typically think to, okay, well, I'm going to leave this game and go into the other game, because none of the other levels really indicate any sort of, saved state. You never really get the idea of, what I have done on this level is now saved and I can affect it from somewhere else, which there could be more that, maybe we're not aware of, but like I said, it's one of the things that it could have been communicated well. It's nice that it's there, and it's cool that it's there, and it's a plus that it's there, but I mean, if it's not easily accessible without having to, notice an achievement and then Google it, there's not a whole lot of a point for it to be there. It's kind of just like a little bit of a hidden Easter egg when it probably wasn't intended to be an Easter egg.
Yeah, it's a mischance, is what it is. I agree. There really aren't. I guess there's some character building.
There's quite a bit, but it's not as once again a lot of this game is very heavily implied, and it's very kind of on the user to find out what's going on. I really like the characters. I really liked the main characters aren't who you play as. The main characters is the original family from the Lakeview cabin, which is the father, the mother, the baby, and the son, or the kid that goes into foster care, and the sister. The 2 kids, the baby, yeah. So that original family is the main characters. They're the main characters in every single level. They're relevant in every single level. But it's also nice that every level had its own distinguished, unique kind of set of, the characters you play as well as the characters that are there just hanging out, and the characters that are there to kind of kill you. I thought it was a nice balance. They were designed well. I really liked the Cabin 5, the Halloween one.
Yep.
You have the teenagers; they're very obviously teenagers. It's a stereotypical trope of one's got a varsity jacket. There was the cop, very obviously a cop. His reactions to everything was hilarious. I love how he just shoots you. The demon I thought was really cool.
Yep.
And then you go to all the killers. I think the killers were well done. The original kind of just creepy baby with a knife is terrifying. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a bit too on the source material. I feel like they could have done a bit with it, but it's still nice that it's not just him. He's kind of got some weird rat thing going on. There's a whole lot of characters in that level that are just, every time you go into a room, you're just like, what the fuck is going on in here? What is this? You go into one room, there's people taking a bath. You go into another room, there's a gimp man tied up, having some fun.
That's it's just stuff like House of 1,000 Corpses, as well as the Texas Chainsaw original, as well as the remaster. There's always the family there. There's trailer park people around. They're all kind of weird and crazy and obscene and dirty.
Hills Have Eyes kind of stuff.
Yeah, Hills Have Eyes is a bit in there. They weren't actually mutants, but yeah, they're actually breeding those rats in the cellar or the top of the house too.
Yeah, And then there's a achievement to save that lady, which
I'm with you. I like these characters. They get a lot across about the character by relying on tropes and stereotypes, which is
it's
a good writing still. It brings so much context just by and the fact that they got it across with so few pixels. We'll get into more in the video, but I gotta say that part really blew me away. But the characters, they don't, like the revealed characters don't grow, don't change, and the background characters are super interesting, but you're not going to learn anything about them on a standard playthrough.
Do they need to grow to be good?
I think so.
It's such a like a small kind of subset of what's going on that it's weird because they don't have names and all the personalities kind of is implied. But I still think that the characters did such a good job, and I don't know if it really would have improved the experience too much to give them a whole lot of a backstory, because I don't really know if it needed it. You're kind of just like, I'm a bunch of teenagers, and this is a short little snippet of this thing, and I'm not sure if it needed that full kind of. There's a lot of kind of mystique to it, and it's intentional. You're not really supposed to have a full understanding of what's going on, because the whole game is a puzzle, and that's part of the puzzle is, who am I and what is going on? And it kind of defeats the purpose if it just tells you it. And at some degree, you kind of grow because you are the character controlling everything. You grow as you figure out what's going on. Okay, well, I can't die. So now everyone's just jumping off the rooftop because they don't care. Whereas originally, you'd be pretty scared to be running around from everything. But the characters that do grow are, of course, the actual monsters and the killers. And there are different endings that have. There's happy endings and some of the things where you can actually resolve the conflict with the family and kind of end this curse that's going on. But unfortunately, that ending's pretty hard to get. But yeah, it's another thing. I feel like it's good, and I can't really explain. But I'm still leaning towards, of course, okay, because there's still a lot of room for improvement. But I find it's so unique. It's hard to judge.
On a personal feeling, I really like what's going on. Really do. There's so much good stuff about it, and because I know all the movies that they're pulling from, I got an instant sense of feeling and understanding and knowledge of who's who and what's what, and it helped me interact with the game better. But if I didn't know the movies, I would have had a much worse experience, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's fair. It does rely heavily on external kind of culture.
Yeah, you've got to really understand the archetypes and the tropes, and there was a bit of information there to help you understand the pieces you really needed to understand.
Yeah.
But like I said, because I understand them, it was great to me. But I could see somebody having not a great experience because of that. And if you're really looking for characters that are deep, meaningful characters, and you want to see interaction and growth in characters and stuff like that, you're not going to see it here unless you really love the game and start digging and digging and digging. Yeah, there is some there that was done well.
Yeah,
it's just too hidden.
There definitely could have been recurring characters. There could have been a bit of comic relief. There could have been some sort of a bit of dialogue here and there. That's one of the things that not a direction I went with. I'm not sure if it's intention or limitation, but yeah, definitely could have been there. And I'm sure maybe the sequel that I'm kind of super stoked for will probably have a bit of that, some actual more interaction.
Yes.
With actual characters rather than them just being kind of action figures that you run around the screen with.
I think one of the biggest things holding the game back is that it was a Flash game when it was first made. And now it's just a collection of Flash games that have been combined together. And originally they're making a Flash game, and then they're making them like sequels. So we're playing a game that is a bunch of game sequels. So the story is, jumping a considerable amount potentially between each movie theater that we're going. And because they presented it as the movie theater way, it's easy to just assume each one is its own individual piece with that out of the box level select.
Yeah. Hopefully the next collection.
They used pop culture Reference to create understandable characters. Well, characters with depth are too hidden, appreciated in a normal playthrough. That sum it up? Is that fair? Hi, Cuddle.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that the playable characters felt more like action figures than actual. Like, you don't have a whole lot of reason to really care for them. They were kind of just tools in the puzzle, which,
Yeah.
I mean, isn't always necessarily a bad thing. But I felt like, there could have been a lot more added to it. You could have, they could have given you some reason to care when one of the people died. You could have been like, no, I wanted this person to, to make it out with me because he's just hilarious, or maybe you feel sorry for them or something.
Exactly what I'm saying. They never feel they never felt like characters. The ones that I was playing, they were only ever a resource for me.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell us the storyline, because I'm super intrigued, and I love that they're all linked together. I'm going to start it on a good, because a storyline doesn't have to be obvious and in your face to actually be good. And it sounds like there's some cool stuff going on.
I don't know if it's good as the problem, because it's a really cool and neat story, but the problem is that it gets pretty separate from the game itself, to the point where like it gets kind of hard to find the storyline in the game. So it's not so much the storyline. There's basically the two of them. There's the storyline that you kind of went and played through, which is similar one that I kind of went and played through, and you get kind of a slight idea what's going on. Like, oh yeah, there's some monsters. They kind of reoccur here and there for this reason, and then we end off in space. But if you actually look into it, I guess a bit of a spoiler warning for people who want to play this game fresh. But I'm assuming if you're watching a review of it, you're kind of expecting a bit of spoilers. But the game originally starts off for Lakeview Cabin. There was a man who he lived with. It was a man, his wife, who was pregnant, and then a son and a daughter. And the pregnant wife has a stillborn, and the stress of that, and I think she dies from it. And then the stress of that from the husband causes the husband to commit suicide. The kids get placed in foster care. So that first cabin area, that's kind of just the spiritual reminiscence of that kid that comes out of the water, and then the husband who comes at you with the axe, and then the witch chick is the wife. And then the tie-in to the Texas Chainsaw ones is kind of a bit more blurry. I can't remember fully off the top of my head if I had my notes on me, but that place takes place near the Lakeview Cabin area, and everything's kind of just really messed up around there. I can't remember if they fully explain like what supernatural stuff is going on. There's a lot of hinting towards it in the 5th installment with all the cult stuff. But the main kind of important one is the 5th, which is the teenage one where you're just like the Halloween theme exploring this like purgatory realm. And that's the one where they kind of explain all the things. So after the the kids get placed in foster care, they kind of fall in love with each other, and they just start kind of having sex with each other. And the son just gets deranged, and he just becomes a serial killer, and he starts going around just killing people in the town. And as one of the newspaper articles says, the cops come in and they see what's going on, and they just shoot him in like a in a cop suicide. And I guess since he's such an evil spirit, he still just lurks around and comes around still killing people. But it's all intertwined from like that point. And there's the occult stuff would take a lot to explain. And then, like I said, and then the last one, like I said, if you really want to see it, you can of course look it up. And then the last one, of course, you're in space. Something's happened to the world. It's been completely shattered. But this evil is now also on the ship and causes, all this other crazy stuff to happen. I can't remember if it's directly linked to how the aliens, expand out, because it kind of starts off with the wife, that lady with the with like the white dress, and all this other evil stuff is. Yeah, I kind of butchered it, but there's like it's all intertwined. The main thing, if you read through it, it's a really good read of like the actual intertwines of it and the
even
common
just
theme of
your mention of those little pieces as you play the game. You start being able to see, you see the teddy bear repeating in the cabin, and the teddy bear pacifying things, and the same sort of memories building. Okay, interesting that one of the women to save is in a a deep freeze. I bet you she's got an interesting lore to her.
Yeah, I found a paragraph here that explains the last one. I'll post this in our Discord as well. This person really breaks it down very well.
Sure.
But so after the son does the killing spree, he harnesses the powers of the curse. So there's this curse that's kind of going around. That's why he's invincible. And that you have to find out that you have to, using the powers of the demon and everything around there. That's why you have to use to kill the killer, because he's invincible due to this power that they found from this curse that their family has. And that's that 5th level. And then eventually they release I think the dad's name is Red, their spirit, and it kind of manifests into this new form, which becomes a CEO of a company that is devoted to researching this curse. And that's what actually creates the space station. And then that space station is devoted to getting at artifacts that have been in contact with the curse. And that's why, the cabin's there. That's why, the daughter of the person's there. That's why anything to do with it is all in that one central location, because this person's researching the curse, because it's relevant to them. And it's kind of just, the main thing is there's a curse intertwined with every single level. It's pretty in-depth. It just unfortunately wasn't explained super well during the actual gameplay.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate, because if you think about it, you start seeing the mask and the chainsaw and all sorts of different pieces from all the different levels on the shelves. Performance was good.
Yeah, it was.
This game
actually
should run on a potato.
It has quite a lot for it too. It's not just as typical, 2D flat pixel. It's actually got some decent lighting.
Oh yeah. The lighting was good. There's good depth to everything. I like the maps. I like the way they navigated it all. Animations. I don't remember a lot of animation.
Yeah, it's so kind of the limitation of the art style they went with, because it was you got very limited pixels to work with. But
yeah,
some of the monster animations were well done. Mostly on the the alien one was pretty good. Those monsters were good. A lot of the stuff, even on the 5th level with the demons, I thought was good. I really liked.
That's true. The flames, the burning of the bodies, and everything in the game within the game.
Yeah. I really love the game.
The terrifying jumping animation. Okay, it's a good. You got me.
That cult is actually relevant. That cult actually happened at that lake. That game takes place at that lake as well. And that, I think it's how the curse starts. It was when they sacrifice that baby or something, and their descendants of this cult. It's all crazy. Read the thing I posted. It's nuts. I really hope that the new game, they really kind of flush out what's going on. Definitely, it sucks because a lot of effort was put into the story, but you have to put so much effort to be able to find it. And from what it shows here, it looks like it took an entire community to be able to pull this together.
Which is cool, because they made a game actually fun and difficult and interesting enough for a community to want to get together and explore it.
I love this game. It is one of my favorite games, and I'm glad I got to make you play it.
I'm glad I played it.
It's hard because you can recommend it, but it's one of those games where it's so hard to read off the first bat, right? Like, you're not supposed to really judge books by a cover, but I mean, all books have artistic covers, and you look at it and it doesn't seem super captivating, but it really, and even the first level you can kind of beat it, and it's kind of like, okay, it's just kind of fun, a bit of a puzzle, but it really doesn't even get until you're on like the 5th level that you really get pulled into kind of what's going on. You're like, wow, there's some really cool, themes and some really cool kind of characters that are being developed here.
Good.
Yeah, I love the style. It is fantastic.
They did so much with so little. They kept that low pixel style through the entire thing. Everything was on point, and everything was identifiable, except for whatever that little metal sock with the key inside was.
I was just going to say, there's a few things that you're kind of just like, I don't know what this is, but I mean, it's part of the experience too, right? It's supposed to be a puzzle. You're supposed to be like figuring out that stuff. But yeah, I have no idea what the hell that thing is either. Some sort of container.
At first I thought, I was like, is this a sock? And I threw it and it went tink. I was like, not a sock. The fuck? But yeah. I mean, you might not like pixel style, and that's fine. And if you don't like pixel style, you're probably not going to like the game. But this was pixel done well.
Especially with that lighting, it really shows that you can still use modern techniques on classic styles and still make them overall modern. Like it was super well done. Like the lighting, like the flashlights and stuff like that, for when it's dark, or even just the fire and during the day, and even when you go into like the club and the spaceship, I thought that stuff was really, really well done. It really still gets the depth and feel of everything. Where typical pixel games, it isn't lighting. Everything's just the same, and the way they did lighting was just the palette gets darker, but that's not really how lighting works. You need to be able to have that range of some things are visible, some things aren't. There's glare and lens flare kind of going on everywhere.
It creates a very spooky and creepy environment with almost 0 pixels.
Yeah, like even just the loading screen, like that sewer, it's terrifying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And like actual pixel wise, it's pretty straightforward and basic. It's just being able to add that level of lighting to really kind of obfuscate what's going on and kind of just not show you everything. It just worked really well.
It was perfect tutorial for the game. It really was.
Well, a lot of times you don't even,
but it is.
Yeah, you don't really even know its level until usually later when you kind of click in that there's a whole kind of puzzle going on. But it lets you play around and pick things up. The first thing you do is you walk by a box and it tells you that you can push a button to pick it up, and you walk by a homeless guy that you can pick up, and then chances are you'll push some random buttons and you'll find out that you can change characters. And then you'll change character to the hobo, and you're like, oh, I have a shotgun, and then you press the attack button to shoot. Oh, I don't have ammo, which tells you need to find ammo for guns. It all kind of communicates all this stuff in a way where you don't necessarily have to. You walk by one of the doors before you even get to the theater, and it says hold to peek, and it teaches you the peeking mechanic without forcing it in your face or having you do an explicit tutorial. Because if someone would say, if I was to pick up the gimmick, and I can just walk right by that, I don't need to absolutely do it.
Yep. Well, the thing is, you can get in the first building as well. So it's player conditioning, right? Like they're saying, okay, most of the time when you see a building, you're going to be able to get into it.
Yeah. But the only drawback is that it's too easy to accidentally launch the Christmas level.
Yeah.
It'd be nicer if it was like a select, like you use the TV to select or something like that. But I get there's only one Christmas level, but that one can be. It's short, but if you haven't played the other ones, it's gonna be hella frustrating. I might play it sometime for people if they want to see it. I've beaten it a few times. I might try to go for one of the harder finishes, but basically there's a baby you have to fucking keep alive, and then Krampus and some other the other monster show up, and they just mess you up and they take your baby. And you have it's one of the levels where you have a very short amount of time before they show up, so you need to figure out what you need to do, and you need to execute it perfectly. Otherwise, they just die. And there's a bit of RNG where you don't know which side they're going to spawn on too, so it's kind of nuts. And it would not be a good time for your first level playthrough.
Yeah, that's bad first impression of the game. I agree, but I do love the fact that the first building you encounter, you can go in. And then they give you the building where you can peek into. Because if the very first thing a player does in a game is encounter something they can only peek into, there's a good chance that a number of people are just going to be like, okay, they're just something to look into, and run past the next one. That's going to happen. You want to condition the player right away to the core mechanics of the game and show them how they're intended to be used. Musical score. We kind of got sidetracked on something there.
It had good kind of ever relevant tone, like music for when it needed it, but on its own, I mean, there weren't any super bangers.
That's true. You would never sit down and listen to any of the tracks.
Yeah, so
I loved their ability to get across tension, though. The one that stands out the most is the Cabin 4. With the horror music that would start playing more and more and more the longer you were in the house.
Yeah, and it's kind of not on this single like its tempo would increase, and it just kind of gets more and more intense because it's good, and like even side levels like the like in the space station or in the club, like I think that it was well done club music. It wasn't like this place is bumping. There's the music within the game on the 5th level, which was done well. It fit that kind of 8-bit era kind of chip tone feel, and even just like it was good. But as I said, it's one of those things. It's hard because like I can't really identify or distinguish it. It's more of like okay leaning good because it did a really good job, applying that emotion and feel to everything that's going on. And if it wasn't there, it would be a lot less of an experience. But it probably was a limitation. Like this game was made by a single person, and I mean they've done everything else just so well. It'd be just amazing too if they just wrote like a super amazing score. What they did write is super amazing, but to the quality, if you had someone who was like fully trained in making music for video games to come in and write a full soundtrack score for every single level, every single event. It's still really good, but there's of course improvements. Just because I really enjoy the game and I really enjoy what's there, I still have to critique what was there, and it fit the theme and was limited, but there's still room for improvement.
Yeah, it's written well enough to be used.
I don't know. I don't know if this style needs it or not.
I mean, I'm gonna give it a bad just because there is none.
But we give RNG good when there is none, when it doesn't need to be there.
That's.
But I guess because they were definitely mimicking. They were definitely mimicking the style or the era of NES and 8-bit, where they just couldn't put voice acting in there, and it definitely probably could have felt out of place. But I think that this game probably, I'd be okay with an okay because it would have really benefited if there was like a narrator. I think it would have been nice. I feel like if there was a narrator, like it had very, very like if it was written well with a very solid performance from someone narrating what was going on and kind of reading between each episode, I think that could have added to the experience. So just because there wasn't voice acting doesn't mean there shouldn't have been. But I find that if every single character talked, it probably would have taken away from the charm that the game had. But there probably were certain little areas that there could have been at least some sort of dialogue. But
that would be
once again, made by a single person, originally was a Flash game. You're not going to have a budget for a Flash game to really get voiceover, like professional voiceover work. So it's definitely better to leave it basic.
Absolutely. I'm okay with the okay. It takes nothing away from the game for not having it. But I agree with you. A little bit of voice between the episodes would have been great, even if it was like little tiny bits of information about the background of what happened here. It doesn't even have to be a lot. Even if it was like a couple cryptic lines where I was like, what that mean? And it gave me that inspiration to go start looking for what that mean.
Yeah, there's a lot of other stuff they could do as well, like a TV you could watch, or a radio you can turn on. Turn on the radio and it kind of talks about what's going on in the background, and they could still theme it and stylize it to fit the era. But could have been nice to have
the radio start on and have the player be able to walk up and turn it off, so they start delivering some that way.
Yeah, it'd be cool to make it part of the puzzle, right? Like you take a radio with you and it says different things, similar to like how the Ouija board was a kind of a recurring clue.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the guy who did Axiom Verge did it by himself or not. If he did a fantastic job on that one too. That was a great game. Sound effects are good though. I love the sound effects in the game. Everything made a sound. The sounds told me a lot about what the items were. Often more than the pixels did.
Yeah, definitely relied on that. Which is it goes to show that you can still have that minimalistic approach, but you need to make sure to use other ways to communicate the information that needs to be there. So you don't have enough pixels to show what this item is. You can still at least give audio cues to what's going on here.
Yeah. Also, I use the sound to know when killers were coming and stuff like that.
Yeah, and like even just all the audio cues for like when they've spawned, there would be some sort of sound in the background. The crows would fly by. And even just the monster design themselves, that like weird kind of yell scream that the aliens did, or the monsters, or the rat, and all that stuff when it scurries in and stuff like that. It was quality. It was all consistently very, very high quality. It's very impressive.
Oh, no, it wasn't bees squeaking. There you go.
Val licks the bed squeaks.
Yep. Who doesn't? I think there are none.
Accessibility, yeah, it's another kind of issue with indie titles, and like a lot of the puzzles are based on visual cues or based on audio cues, so it's hard to be able to kind of add. You would have to redesign a lot of the game for it, which is unfortunate because it kind of limits a lot of people who can play it. But it's understandable that they had a vision in mind and they had to do it. Like, there's so much that's audio cue, from the people coming up to the Morse code puzzles, and there's so much that's also like visual cue to like the colored keys, and even just like certain color. Like when you're working with that many pixels, like you really need your colored pixels to distinguish what these items are. And that's an unfortunate side effect of it. I don't know too much what they could have really done, but unfortunately we can't just say, oh well, it doesn't apply. We still need to keep in mind that we need to make these games accessible to as many people as we can.
Totally. Give me a sec. I will be back. You can start on talking about the mechanics of the game.
Sure.
And I think I'm just going to give it a good before I go, and you can just explain why you're on the sheet as well. Because you can type into it.
Has it been added to RageBot? Or did you send it to me? I don't know if I have the link to it.
Okay, here, let me just... You are an editor on it, so it would be in the folder that it's back.
Okay. I'll pull it up while I talk about it. Find it in Google Docs.
I'll pimp it for everyone else. You should be able to just get it from there. Alright, I'll be right back.
Alright, so mechanics. Like, this game is heavily based on like the actual gameplay mechanics. And the main mechanic isn't so much something you control, it's the puzzle. It is a puzzle game first, a horror game a bit like just right after that, and then a platformer adventure after that, and I think it does all of those very well. The puzzles are pretty hard. They can be kind of a bit too hard, but these are fairly short games and they kind of need to be that complicated. And the more complicated these puzzles are, the more satisfying it is to kind of solve them. And they weren't too frustrating to the point where there are a lot of games you can kind of play where the developer will kind of just put in a gotcha, like, oh, it's behind this building here that, we've never had this similar mechanic to use before, or you had to stand in a certain location and push a button a couple times without any sort of indication this is what you're supposed to do. A lot of the puzzles in this game at least had hints to what they're supposed to do, and they used the same similar mechanics of usually to get an item, either need to use the item on the puzzle item to complete it, or you need to have the item in the same room, or you need to do some sort of action with the characters with stuff around it. It was all kind of the same similar thing of you use items to solve things, use information to know where to use the items to solve the puzzle, and most of the time solving the puzzle is killing the serial killer or killing the bad guy, which puts in the horror mechanic of the combat. Yeah, they really doubled and tripled down on that. There's actually Des missed it in the first level. There's a key above the bed, and he laid down in the bed for quite a while, but it never really clicked that he should get another person in the bed, and if he does that, they knock down the key that you used to open up a door to get some items. So that was a recurring one in multiple levels. But it definitely added to the charm. It was not something I expected. It's also something very random on stream when you hit a button on a box and all of a sudden you're just a naked pixel dude with a 3-pixel, like wang just walking around. But it's still interesting mechanics, right? You don't really see too many games that have that. I've never really played too many puzzle platformer games. It's not really... I've never really seen it before, especially with like horror stuff put into it. It is... I don't know. I find it was incredibly unique, incredibly just overall satisfying to play. There was times where I was super frustrated. I kind of binged this game over the course of like 2 weeks, or like a weekend and the following weekend, and I was up to like 6 a.m. and I was doing the 5th level, which is the one where it's the teenagers where you can't die, and it was just 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm just tearing my hair out, being like, what am I supposed to do? I'm like, you basically just get stuck, and I just by small chance noticed that Morse code, and I got kind of frustrated with that one too, because it's really cool to figure out. But if you've never really been exposed to Morse code before, you've never really heard it, you're completely going to miss that. You're completely going to miss that it's not just music in the background, that it's an actual message, and I can find someone just getting, locked by that. But as long as you can get through that stuff, a lot of the other kind of levels aren't so much puzzle focused, the more, kind of combat focused. Like the first level is a bit of a puzzle, because it's puzzle figuring out, the items I need to kill this guy. But technically speaking, if you're also good enough at the game, you can also kind of just attack them. You just charge at them if you can kite them properly with items, or know what to throw at them. You don't necessarily have to set up this elaborate, Home Alone mousetrap kind of scenario to kill them. You can kind of just walk up and get the shotgun and shoot them, and then slash them a few times. Yeah, it's like that, and like you if I remember correctly, you need that Morse code to solve that puzzle, at least for that ending, for most of the endings, because that's how you get the witch out of the game. It's like I said, I spent hours wandering. Like that one took me the longest, just because I got stuck on that, and I don't know how long. It probably would have taken days if it wasn't for Rubido pointing that out as well. Like it's such a small part and such a minuscule, one small screen of the level that can get you, but it still stands to pull off. I was just talking about the Morse code puzzle. And that one was probably the hardest and kind of most bullshit mechanic that was there. But even then, like, it's not impossible. It's just really heavily relies that, you know what you're doing. But they could have at least, I'm not sure if they might have, but they might not have hinted that, you need to know Morse code for this level. There's definitely ways they could have done that. But overall, it is just fantastic. I'll let Des talk about his favorite levels and his favorite mechanics as well. Oh, and he is gone again.
It happens. Mechanics in general, I guess you already kind of went over, or were you just talking?
I didn't talk about my favorite level. I talked about just kind of how it's a puzzle game first, then a horror game, and then a platformer / adventure after that, and it kind of does all of those very well.
It's definitely puzzle first.
Yeah, and then there was definitely some bullshit things. Like I said, the Morse code one is probably the most bullshit puzzle out of it. That one it's so easy to miss.
I was lucky that
I feel it.
Rubido noticed that there was a sound in the middle, and I went back to oh yeah, it only plays right there, doesn't it? And I was like, is that Morse code? Like one of the first things I said.
It took me, and like luckily, like you were aware of it. So some people won't make that distinction, right? It's so subtle and
easy to miss. Definitely. It
took me like 3 hours. I don't know why I was so determined. But eventually, I just noticed it, and I was like, okay. And then it comes down to like, well, now I have to Google Morse code, because not too many people will, remember how to read Morse code. I actually got it wrong the first time I tried to translate it, because I've never really done that too much. So I ended up getting, words, and I'm like, okay, well, this is just a garbled nonsense of words. I thought it was like an anagram, so I'm trying to mix these letters around. And then I went back to it, and I remembered, there's the phone. I haven't entered any numbers into that. Maybe it's numbers, and I added like another extra hour to my playthrough. But once I solved it, I felt it's a fantastic feeling. So there's definitely a reward for it. But I was talking about that balance between puzzles need to be hard, because if they're too easy, there's too many hints, then it's kind of just you're walking through it, and you don't really get that satisfaction. It's fun at first, but it loses substance very quickly. You need to be challenged. You really need to work your brain, because then you really kind of get those reward chemicals being like, I figured it out. And even if you do it with a community of people, like these games are also really fun to play with groups of friends because you don't all necessarily need to be controlling the character to be working together on the puzzles. It's an actual really fun experience.
It was a very old school gaming experience, is what it was. Because that's what the old school games used to be like. You know, there weren't a lot of multiplayer, but they were difficult enough that it took everybody thinking and working together, and have a bunch of friends sitting around an NES, and one person's playing and everyone else yelling, "Try this! No, try this!"
Yeah, exactly. And like, I have Lakeview Valley, which is the kind of RPG, kind of Twin Peaks feeling game. I haven't actually fully played it yet, so I might try to see if I can get a group of people together if they want to just spend a few hours here and there playing through it, because it seems like it's going to be really cool. And I'm assuming it's going to be the same kind of puzzle adventure, but instead of a platformer, now it's a top-down RPG. Then there's from the puzzle mechanics, and there's the horror game mechanics, which I found they also did very well. They keep you tense. They keep you very tense all the time. They accomplish this by, keeping a consistent experience, but also changing up, where the monster is going to come from. You can't always expect the same things. It makes you kind of uneasy. Sometimes they show up right out of the gate. Sometimes they show up, super late, and sometimes they don't show up at all. You have to summon them, and it kind of keeps you on your toes. And you are scared when those guys show up at first. The other one that isn't really like the second game is the most horror-like and a bit less puzzle-like, because you're mostly just running through trying to get your gas cans and get out, and it's more action-oriented of you just need to be able to beat up everyone in your way and fight them. And then the fifth one is
that out too. So.
Yeah. It's definitely all puzzle, but that one's more like horror, more action-based.
Yeah, and you have to also learn. And like the biggest puzzle to that one was figuring out that the chicken is the deadliest weapon in the world.
Mm-hmm. I didn't even use the chicken for that. I just you can get the drill, and I found the drill is just like super OP.
The drill only killed like 2 people, and it burned out.
Yeah, but you could use it to get the chainsaw, and then you just laugh from there.
Gotcha.
I remember just getting the chainsaw somehow. I remember the drill was heavily used, and the chainsaw. But yeah, that one's more like you have to be able to fight things. Whereas the fifth one is all puzzle. You can't even die. You're supposed to die. Actually, there's no real lose mechanic besides the unfortunate ability to soft lock yourself. I think is possible on that level, which kind of sucks.
I think so. Oh, maybe. Yeah.
I think you did soft lock yourself at first.
Because there's an... Oh, yeah. If everybody dies to a way other than the cop, and you've killed the cop, you can't unleash the demon.
You're supposed to be able to shoot someone and have it work, but I think it still glitches out. It's not consistent. You shot someone, it didn't change over, so either it was intentional or not. It's still a soft lock, which kind of sucks because...
it's not about what kills them, it's about who kills them.
Yeah.
And one of them has to be killed by the cop.
That's why it's because it's the justice.
And then killed by something else, then that's gone. And the cop, if you've killed the cop, he can't pick up his gun and shoot you again. That's where the break is. But you can restart it, and it is right at the beginning of the puzzle.
Yeah, but the unfortunate thing is because of the game and the way it's it can take you a long time to realize that. And no other level you really, that's not really an intended mechanic. There's not too many other levels. You're just kind of like, oh, I failed a requirement. I need to restart, maybe except for the last one. There's a lot of, you kind of need to do things fast, and it makes sense to restart. But for that one, you can go a long time. I think you went a little bit of time, trying to figure out that death mark and how to get that one. And, it's not super clear that it's justice scales. And the only reason why you kind of had an understanding is because you stood on it before when you had the cop kill, and then after you die with it. But if the cop killed you and then you killed yourself, you would never be able to kind of figure out okay, well, how do I get this? You would explore for so long before you just say, all right, I'm just going to start fresh.
I could still see a logical path through it. I quickly realized that killed by different things would change. Or killed by different sources like the killer kills me, I'm this. If my friend kills me, I'm this. You kill yourself, which is only done with pills. Jumping off the roof didn't work for that.
Yeah, well, it was poison. It's supposed to be. It was nature, justice, murder, and I guess fucking gravity. I don't know what the last one is. How it's all intertwined.
The last one was friends, like killed by your friend anyway.
No, you don't have to kill your friend. You can just jump off the roof.
That would be okay. Because if that's the same one you'd get if like I axed one of them to death, they'd get that symbol.
I think that's just because my image has been a glitch. But that if you look at the picture, that picture is an upside down person falling, and that's how you die. And then the top one's the dagger because you're supposed to be killed by the killer.
Mm-hmm.
The bottom one is justice scales, and it's supposed to be injustice, which is getting killed by the cop. And the left one is a poison symbol, which is, you die by poisoning by eating the pills.
Okay.
But it seems like it kind of glitched up a bit. So, like I say, it can be kind of confusing, right? It's not super clear because, it's pixelated icons. And then just overall, you fall for the first death, and now you have this one. And sometimes it keeps defaulting back to that for some reason. It's not super clear why, but there were certain mechanics that got kind of annoying. But overall, it is fantastic. It did a really good job of being a puzzle game. Did a really good job of being a horror game, and it did a really good job at being a platformer. And overall, I'd say it was good. I'd say it did everything fairly well, and the tidbits and the annoyances were very small.
Yeah, I agree. They were small. I was wise enough to figure out what was going on and go back and fix my mistakes and get through it. It took me a while to do it, but when you look at how long I played the game as a whole, it didn't take me that long to get through it all. It might take other people longer, but it was 2 streams and then the little bit of the next stream.
And as I was saying before, there's no super bullshit puzzles. It was a lot of games will kind of have this thing where they'll you have to stand here and push a button a bunch of times. It'll indicate or the clue is hidden behind a building that you have to stand in a specific area and click here or do this or do that, and it's stuff that as I think Val was mentioning before, there was an era of they'd make these games super hard with the intention of selling the guide packs. Mm-hmm. Where this game doesn't have a guide pack in any games, they're just online anyway, so it's well balanced.
I agree. Bugs, I'm going to give an okay. Offhand.
Yeah, the soft locking sucked, but yeah. I don't think it crashed too much. There might have been some other minor bugs that are kind of hard to distinguish between just kind of weird behavior with the enemies. You're not too sure if it's bugging out, but then getting up right away or moving too far away, or if that's intentional or not.
Yeah, any point-and-click game from the 80s and 90s. That's why I don't like point-and-click games. They soured me. That's just my experience with them. Always been my experience with them. So I just stopped playing them. So there is RNG in the game. And I think, honestly, it's used pretty well.
I'd say good. It's annoying, but it's intentionally annoying because it's supposed to keep you on your toes on the second level. It's a piss off.
And the fifth, or I'll just numbering the fourth, the alien level.
I think every level has,
randomly.
Yeah, every level has a little bit of RNG. The first one has the least. I think it's mostly just when the person spawns is random. Everything else from there is there, as well as the cues of the killer are random. Sometimes he's hiding behind the building, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they write messages for you, and sometimes they don't. But it's nice because if it happened every time, it becomes common. But it's nice that like on your third playthrough, all of a sudden he wrote something on the wall. It kind of throws you off a little bit and freaks you out, and it's part of that horror experience where you can't keep it consistent because you get used to it. It needs to keep you on your toes. And the second level, where like I said, like they redo the layout, and it's like, well, this is annoying. I just need to get on it. You feel like you need to get kind of lucky where when you have enough skill, you know what you're doing, you can do that level over and over again, and sometimes it'll kind of help you, but that level would be so much easier if it wasn't randomized. You would just be able to do it on your second or third attempt
Yeah, it'd be too easy.
It really needs to keep you on your toes. And these are, they're already short enough, and that's one mechanic they use to keep it longer. And it's a bit annoying at first, but it's honestly it adds a lot of replayability to it too. If you want to go back and try to do the achievements, which I ended up doing because I saved the pregnant woman, and it keeps it fresh. You're just like, all right, what am I going to get? It makes you, if it wasn't for that, you would get used to not having to peek through every door and having to peek. Exactly. For that level, adds a lot of stress.
It would nullify the peek mechanic after like 1 or 2 playthroughs. You just wouldn't need to anymore. It makes the mechanics important, relevant, and necessary with the RNG. Brilliant use of it.
Are we leaving mechanics as okay, or did we say that was a good?
Sorry, which mechanics?
Mechanics.
Okay.
Yeah. They're okay. I thought we said they were good.
We started as good, but as we found more and more little issues with it, I went down to an okay. With a touch of too much obscurity in some areas. And
I think that's okay. I think that it's part of the puzzle, unfortunately. I still view overall the mechanics of the game were good. Some of the puzzles are too hard, but I mean, I feel like that's a good problem to have with puzzles because they're still solvable. They are still a little too obscure, like I said, but that unfortunately kind of happens with puzzle games. You'll never have a perfect puzzle game where there isn't some part of it that's complete bullshit. But for the 5 levels or 6 levels complete, or 7 levels, I guess, with the 2 bonus levels, there's 1 or 2 instances of bullshit that I can bring up, which is a lot saying for everything else going on for it. And that success rate is pretty good. And even then, you still figured it out within a day. It took me 4 or 5 hours of wandering aimlessly, which kind of sucked. But I mean, eventually I still, it's not impossible. And then worst comes to worst, it's not like it's impossible to find a guide for it to kind of get through that part. So people aren't going to be completely locked.
Yeah, the days of the internet have changed a lot of things. Like the biblical reference in it. Even if you don't know it's a biblical reference, if you just type in exactly that written on the floor into Google, you'll get the words you need.
Yeah. And then it's still vague enough, which is cool. It wasn't just there's a lot of, some puzzle games could just have it tell you exactly what you need to do or translate it. But this one was still kind of vague because it has, the lover part, but also the fight and hate part. And, that hate part got me first too. They need to hate each other, right? And it's the brother and sister. Okay, well, maybe they need to kill each other. And I tried killing them in a bunch of different ways. And eventually lovers, because it's not the first thing to come to your mind. Or I gotta make this family bang. It's just but it's, yeah, it's, I guess the overall,
it's funny, my mind went straight there.
It took you a little bit. It took you definitely killed them a few times. You at first killed them and went back to that room a few times. It wasn't the first thing was I gotta make them bang. It's always
I knew that was going to be part of it. I definitely knew that was coming.
Yeah.
I just had to figure out
Let's try it out.
Control, I think, was very good. Everything was snappy and quick and responsive, and
it's consistent. The mechanics,
consistent. Everything with all the levels, all the levels are different, but after you've learned one level, you can play them all.
Yeah, you interact with everything the same way. Things were smooth. You didn't really fight too much. You didn't fight the controls much. The small nitpick I had was some of the combat can be annoying, but I think that's intentional. I mean, if the first level, if you can just straight up murder that guy with an axe, I mean, that wouldn't be much of a level, right? It probably makes sense that you can get a hit or 2 in and then back off rather than trying to just straight up fight him. Yeah, it just feels a bit.
The control felt proper on it. I had smooth control. I could swing whenever I wanted. It's just he's so tanky. He could just walk through your swing and touch you, and he is a damage volume. So when he touches you, you bounce back instantly and drop your weapon, and then he just picks it up and starts chasing you with it right away. I think that's perfect. That's exactly how that should play out. That's what happens if you try to take an axe to a supernatural being.
Yeah, I totally forgot to talk about that. I wanted to bring up for animation was the on-hit effects are hilarious. When you get hit and everyone just goes, that shocked look, and they start just, if they got hit, they're bleeding, or maybe they're missing a foot, and they're just it was just hilarious to me. I love the little kind of...
Yeah, I did like the dismembering of people, and they would actually slow down as they lose legs, and... Yeah, but they got across all of that expression and personality.
It's charming too. It was a little bit of comic relief that's also in horror.
And they got it with so few pixels on the face. such a perfect expression with like 10 pixels.
For people who haven't played it, the actual platforming of it was super smooth. It's especially for like this kind of the era they were going for, especially something that like Car would be super familiar with, is that platforming is kind of not always the best. You don't always feel like you have proper control. You know, you can miss ledges, you can miss things, you can, maybe you accelerate a bit too much or you decelerate a bit too slow, so you feel like you're heavy and sliding around. This game actually has like super solid feeling platforming controls.
The level select level is kind of a perfect introduction to the controls.
It is.
Pick up, throw around, peek, enter.
It kind of brings you back to like the original Mario, because the original Mario does a really good job at introducing the controls without telling you, because they didn't really have that back then, right? They can't really display text too well. And the first thing you do is you walk up to the gate, like you walk up, and I don't know if the Goomba's right out of the gate or if it's a block right out of the gate, but it kind of implies that you need to jump. And then, if you jump into the block, it breaks, and it gives you something, you go forward, and then there's a Goomba. And there's no going back for you, and that Goomba's coming right at you, so one or two things is going to happen. You're going to think, oh, I'm going to jump over it and get by it, or I'm going to jump on it and something happens. But there's also, like, if you do nothing, it touches you and kills you. But it's so close to the start that, it's not really a problem. You just restart and you know what to do. You instantly learn without having... You're shown, not really told.
Yep.
And the game does the same thing, where it puts you in the front, you can walk by, and the thing comes up, oh, I can push a button, what does this do? Oh, I picked up the box. You can walk by the hobo with a shotgun, and the same thing comes up. Oh, you can pick up the character too. You walk by a building. I don't know if it tells you to peek or enter, but if you walk by the next one, it definitely tells you to peek, which is nice. It gives you that mechanic right out of the gate, and a little bit of just like, it doesn't really help until you realize that level select is a level. So it's kind of just a nice, mood setting thing of just some horror. But then it also teaches you to enter that, that VHS room. Oh, this is how you enter somewhere. And then instead of just, doing it right away to the level select and starting the game.
Yep. All right, I'm getting ready. Go ahead and give away some more games.
I absolutely love this game. It's such a gem. And every time, I tell people about it, they're like, wow, that looks super cool. I've never heard of it. And I'm like, this game needs more attention. This developer. It definitely has cult status, but there's still so many people who have never even heard of it. And
oh yeah, every time I talk about it.
Such a charming experience.
Every time I talk about it in a Twitch channel, everyone's like, never heard of that. What's that? Play it. It'll kick your butt, but go play it.
I'm so stoked if this sequel actually has co-op, because I think that's the one thing missing for me in the first one is the ability to have co-op. If the second one does, I find it's going to be so much fun just to try to solve these puzzles with friends.
Yeah, I think co-op would be a lovely addition to it. Sure. For sure. So, now that we've wrapped up, thoughts, opinions, arguments from the Peanut Gallery. No oil can item for the squeaky bed.
I wonder how long they spent getting the perfect squeaking sound for that. Even just programming that, they probably spent way too long just watching that animation happen, or testing it. You have to test it with every single character to make sure it works.
They really did get the perfect sound.
Yeah, it's it's perfectly comical. Like I said, they like most horror, proper horror, still needs that slightly bit of comic relief, not just like you'll notice when a horror game or movie is missing it, because you're always tense, but eventually you get used to that tense feeling and you kind of just always expect it, and it doesn't really make you tense anymore, really scare you. You're kind of just like, all right, this is just like a clusterfuck of a lot of fucked up shit happening. Oh well, but if a game or a movie, intertwines, funny bits and parts that make you chuckle, make you laugh, it kind of lowers your guard down a little bit and falls you back into, oh, I'm having fun, I'm smiling, and then all of a sudden it smacks you right back over the head with, okay, now you're terrified again because something happened or something showed up and killed you or something popped out at you. So it's definitely needed. It feels like a lot of times it can be campy, especially from the 80s, and campy works, but overall I still think horror it's a big part of it.
Easy for people to forget today, but horror started out as a comedy. That's the origins of horror. Horror was for kids. Like
and it's just
original,
morbid.
Like old horror. One of the first horrors to break the mold of comedy for kids to seriously fucked up was Night of the Living Dead. When that movie came out, because everyone was so used to it being for comedies and kids, they played Night of the Living Dead for kids in classrooms. They watched it in school.
Man,
those kids got fucked up.
Yeah, but it's wild. But yeah, it's a lot of the reason it's there too is it's still relevant for a lot of comedy stuff today. For when there's like serious topics that happen in the world, a lot of the ways that people deal with it is through comedy, is through kind of satire. It kind of helps take the edge off of the seriousness of it. It doesn't take away from how serious it is, but you don't have to deliver it in such a way that's going on. And that's why you find like a lot of, even news outlets that specialize in satirical articles like The Onion and stuff like that, or like they talk about some serious issues that are going on in the world. And they do it through satire, and you laugh at it, like, haha, this is, because they have some like terrible headlines, but they're still pulled from relevant world that's happening in the world. They take something terrible, make it so exaggerated that it's silly, but it's still referencing something terrible that's going on in the world.
Absolutely. I love old horror, by the way. Even gore, like the old gore where they had gone past the kiddie stuff into like obtuse and over the top gore. It didn't look real. It was just sort of ridiculous, essentially. And they knew it was ridiculous, so they went with the camp storyline. So if you want to watch one of my all-time favorite old horror movies, find yourself a copy of The Gore Girls. Prepare yourself for a treat. Put it in chat. I'll have to start a terrible old movie recommendations for you. I love 60s, 70s horror movies.
There probably also exists a movie called Gore Horror Course too. Probably. There was a lot of that, especially even to the 80s when it was the prime era of B movies.
Check something. Oh, perfect! Ha ha ha! Excellent. Another copy of Fahrenheit Indigo Prophecy. I did have a second one. I'm so happy. What a game. What a game. Hey. Oh, right. So we were kind of rambling there, but we've got Rift Kick, Rubido, Mr. Lowe, Christo, I know how to track down, and Babowski, another person I know how to track down. So we can give away some games. Yes. It's actually a pretty good game, too. There we go. So, that should wrap up that. Hope you all enjoyed the chat. I know I had fun. Ran a little late again. Pseudo and I tend to do that when it's just the two of us getting together, and we are able to do that.
It's fun to talk about games, especially even some bad games, even good games. It's all just fun to talk about.
Well, yeah, talking about bad games still helps you learn more about games, right? It gives you more to talk about, if anything, because you can diagnose the issues and think of ways that it could have been improved. Maybe we should do another one of those. We haven't done one in a while. Everything wrong with and how to fix it.
Yeah.
We'll do one soon.
Definitely.
One soon. Next week, however, since Raid should be back, will be final bosses. Prepare your favorite games. Come with your favorite examples of final bosses. And come with your favorite examples of why would you do this, bosses? And we'll talk about all of them. There is this horror movie where one of the actresses is naked most of the movie. I have like dozens of those movies. Dozens of them. Dozens of them. Look into the 70s exploitation era, and that's all it is. What you're specifically looking for is horror sexploitation, and you'll get like a million movies of exactly what you've just said. It's like a whole genre. While you're at it, check out Pinku. Pinku is awesome.
Good. It was a horror movie trope for quite a while, but then finally fell into its own genre. You can still see it in like, especially in the 90s to nowadays. It was like, I'm not sure if it was to get that like R rating or something, but they're always at some points it just kind of got a bit unnecessary for a lot of you. Just like modern horror, you're like, okay, like can we get back to the actual like movie now?
I love those old movies. They were grand. But we'll stop there. I need to eat something. So, thank you very, very much for joining. I'm Deus.
And I'm Pseudo.
And may all your shots be headshots.